Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to You've Championed Yourself. Who are you? I'm Chris Ferguson, your host. It has always been a dream of mine to showcase ordinary people doing extraordinary things in their lives for themselves and for others. Those who have taken their dreams and their ideas, then turned it into their reality as they reach beyond their personal struggles, their pains, and their traumas, where so many have given up, where so many have lost hope. There are the few who can walk through their obstacles and challenges, not knowing where it is going to take them to. They trust enough not to give up, to do the follow through in their personal life, their career, and in relationships. This is what I call a champion in life. Today, I have an amazing lady here. Her name is Krista Giannak. I don't want to spoil anything, so let's bring Krista in and let's have our conversation. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me, Chris.
Oh, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Let's talk about your backstory, Krista.
All right. Well, to start with, it's very ironic. As a writer, I've been telling other people's stories for years now, and yet I haven't always shared my own story of overcoming fears and challenges. I started as a scared kid. Now I'm a business owner, networker, and skier who just happens to be blind. I had to learn to embrace my story instead of hiding from it. See, when I was younger, and even now, I get frustrated sometimes at getting asked the same old tired blindness questions. Oh, how do you type? Oh, how much vision do you have? Boring, 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 because that's my everyday life. And I just want to get to the good stuff. I want to learn about you. I want to grow. I want to learn. I want to discover. Here's the thing, that frustration, or, I mean, let's be honest, even anger, underneath that, it's because I'm not angry at any particular person, and I'm not angry at the questions themselves. I want people to ask what's in their head. My frustration is with the fact that the way that we look at disability as a society, when I meet people, I wish that people knew more about disability so that they wouldn't have to ask, so that we all wouldn't have to ask the first blind person we meet, the first deaf person, the first amputee, all the questions. I wish that every person with a disability didn't have to be the walking billboard educating the world. And yet, here I am. And if I don't tell people, if I don't excite people and inspire people, who's going to, right? And that's what I learned, that ultimately people are going to tell our stories whether we want them to or not. So we might as well direct how they tell our stories. We might as well embrace it, and we might as well make it fun along the way.
I love that. I love that. And the fact is that you are enjoying your life compared to just existing in it. And that is another thing that I love about you.
Absolutely. Because
I don't know who's calling. So
in times of my life where I was just existing, or worse, when I was hating my life, those are the times when I knew things needed to change. If that makes sense.
It does. It does. In life, so many people have limited views about things. And instead of having that open mind and just accepting people for who they are, they want to try to understand the whys.
And yeah, I'm very much a why person. I always go for understanding, why do things happen? How do things happen? And what I have learned is that the answers aren't always obvious to us. There are lots of systems at play that direct our lives, and you know, we live in an imperfect world, but as humans, we wouldn't want it any other way. If we had a perfect world, we couldn't evolve, we couldn't grow, we couldn't even be who we are today, because we couldn't have evolved in a perfect world.
Can we talk about that journey from fear to triumph as a scared kid?
Sure. Well, as a scared kid, I was too afraid to even walk around my block because I had all these irrational fears about, what if the driver doesn't see me? What if I get kidnapped? what if something bad happens? What if I get lost and can't figure out my way? you know, all these fears. I needed, but that it was such an important, so you know how sometimes we have fears that we just, we know on an intuitive level, no matter how young or old we are, we know on an intuitive level that this is a pivotal moment in our lives, that we absolutely need to face this fear or we will not get anywhere we want to go. You ever had that experience?
Yes.
Well, this was one of those types of fears. I absolutely knew that if I did not overcome this fear of walking around my block by myself, that I wouldn't get anywhere in life. I would, as you put it, exist and not grow.
I love that.
That is what gave me the strength to overcome that fear. I still remember the day when I was outside with my cane and I had a teacher, because in the blindness world, we need to learn skills and we need specialized teachers to show us the way. And that's where my travel training or mobility teacher came in. I still remember the day when we were just walking together. She had strategically parked her car because we were planning to have me walk alone. So she strategically kind of parked her car down the street. And she got in her car and she drove away. And I will never forget that moment, how I just started to absolutely hyperventilate and I just started to run back home. It was not a positive experience in the moment. I was panicking. But afterward, I was drained, and yet I felt that I had accomplished something. I was on the right path to facing that fear. And now when I travel places, when I book trips, to go skiing, and when I walked into networking events and all of that, if I had never faced that fear, I would not be where I am today. So that's the scared kid part of the story.
Wow, wow, wow. Can we talk about the fear of video and your beginnings as an unintentional entrepreneur?
Sure. I did not intend to be a business owner. If you would have asked my 5-year-old self, are you going to own a business? She would have been like, what's that? I knew that I wanted to write and I wanted to interact with people and find out what makes them tick. I wanted to learn and discover and all that. I knew that even as young as like 5 or 6, because I was already starting to write. And I always seemed to have some kind of a story in my head. The thing was, though, that as I graduated from high school and college and I did my internships and jobs, a number of situations happened where I had a nonprofit eliminate my PR position entirely.
Oh, wow.
I had newspapers that got bought out that were local here. I realized in the interview process that I just wasn't checking the right boxes. People would call me every now and again, and then they would say, oh, do you know graphic design? Do you know HTML? Are you a B2C writer, which I was doing B2B or journalism writing.
Right.
So it's just, I just wasn't checking boxes and I was losing confidence fast. It was not a good time in my life. I was very, very depressed. And yet through that, sometimes when you hit that moment, I think maybe rock bottom is different for everyone. But for me, that was the point. I was feeling so low that I knew that I didn't want to keep living that way. Something needed to change. I knew I was worth the effort. So that part helped me to move forward as well. I'm like, I knew that I mattered. It's interesting. My business name is wisewords.thatmatter.com.
I love that too. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah. And looking back, it made a difference. The fact that I mattered, I was worth it. And that's what gave me the strength to move forward with the the steps, because there were many small steps. Sometimes people say happiness is a choice. I don't believe that. It's actually many, 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 countless, unnumbered small choices that we make or don't make or aren't able to make every day.
And I think it has to do with our inner chatter, that thinking inside that makes us feel that we are not our best version of ourselves at that moment, and they start second guessing themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So
So
I needed to go out there, meet people, network. And I was afraid because I didn't want people to, going back to the blindness thing, I didn't want people to see me as a blind person first. And as soon as I walk in with that cane, that's what people see. And that really upset me and scared me in terms of, I know people have low expectations of people with disabilities. I felt in many ways that those low expectations got in my way more often than the disability itself.
I agree. Absolutely agree.
So that was the fear. And yet I had to do it anyway because I could see no other path forward. The interview path just wasn't working. I needed to meet employers. I needed to meet people where they were instead of having them have all the cards. I needed to get my own work. I needed to build my own portfolio, explore my own path.
I love the fact that you have, in checking mark off all the boxes of limitations, you have done that in a short time in your life. Are there going to be more boxes? Are there going to be more limiting thoughts and beliefs? Absolutely. But I feel you're determined enough in life to check those marks off on each side of those boxes to eliminate them of anything in the future.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And in that is a true gift in life. And there's a lot of people who can't even do that with sight, with sound, with speaking and coloring and whatever you want to call it, with all the faculties in life. So as we go through life, and you became this unintentional entrepreneur, what was the fear of video? Was it because you were blind?
Well, that was part of it. Yeah, because I was afraid that because I can't look directly at the camera, that people would think, oh, what's wrong with her? Oh, why isn't she looking at the camera? Oh, the camera's not the right angle. Oh, this, oh, that. And they would see all of that instead of seeing me. That was my fear. What ended up happening was I got interviewed for various reasons, and that was easier because at least they could control the camera, and that was better because it was like, oh, they can do the work and they can introduce me so people will know the deal. So that was easier. And then a few years ago, we were in a world on Facebook where Facebook Live suddenly was the hot thing. People would click on videos simply because they were live. I watched other people getting all this exposure. I watched other people getting all these responses. I watched them stumble and bumble and fumble. And I'm like, how are they getting success? And I'm not, because I'm just sitting here and not going live.
And did you start going live?
I did. And the fun thing about going live, aside from the fact that at that time it worked for me algorithmically on Facebook, because that was just the way Facebook was. But aside from that, there's something freeing about being live. People have an intuitive sense that you're not going to be perfect. You don't have to know every word you're going to say. You don't have to have no ums and uhs ever. You don't have to do all of these things that maybe people expect of a more polished, produced product.
And I agree. Absolutely agree.
So
but
that
it also
freed me.
allows it does, but it also allows the empathetic side of you and the vulnerability of you to come through to see who you truly are.
And a lot of my early videos were me forced laughing about all the technical glitches I was having. Because I was, And it's funny because one video someone pointed out that my laugh was forced, and I said yes, and I'm not even pretending that it isn't. It was a question of that I was kind of like figuring out how to move forward, how to make myself feel better about the situation.
I agree. I mean, there's a lot of people. I have problems with technology, and my husband's had to restrain me from throwing my computer across the room when it's like, why aren't you doing what I'm asking you to do?
Yeah, I mean, I love technology. Technology has gotten me where I am today. I wouldn't be where I was today if somebody didn't think outside the box to create software that reads the screen out loud or outputs it to a braille display. I wouldn't be where I am today if people didn't care about accessibility and universal design, making materials and websites available to all.
And I agree with that. And that's the part I love about humanity, where people see everybody and understand that everybody has specific needs, and let's address all of them, not just a simple few.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about how you learn to ski, because most people that are blind don't ski.
Right.
I love the fact that you do.
Yeah, I didn't even think it was possible until my martial arts sensei came along and told me about this wonderful program in Vermont for adaptive sports. I was like, really? So the first lesson that I learned in my blind skiing journey is literally, if you think something's impossible, go find somebody who's already done it. I like to do this little superhero voice, drum roll, please find the impossible people.
And so
Because that's what they were to me. They were impossible people doing something that I couldn't imagine. How the heck are they going to do this and be safe?
And how was your first skiing experience?
Well, a lot had to come before I even got on the slopes.
Mm.
And that's the interesting part, is that I'm a very analytical, methodical type person. I don't just leap into fear. I needed to have some confidence in what was going to happen. So I called them up and I asked 1,000,001 questions, mostly about getting hurt. What ultimately happened, though, is that the director of the program said to me, he answered my questions, and he tried to share as much as he could about their methods, but he said, "Why don't you come and experience it for yourself? Why don't you come and see how it is? You don't even have to ski. You can just get on the snow with us and be with us and check it out." And I was like, "Oh, I can just check it out." That sounded so non-threatening. Like, I can just check it out and I can take it step by step as far as I'm comfortable. So that made me feel much better that I could take it at my own pace, especially something like skiing that was supposed to be fun.
Right.
We don't want to make it not fun because you move too fast.
Or you go really, really fast.
Yeah. So that first weekend, I'll never forget. The sensory experiences came first. The feel of the peppery snow on my face, the fall line, the slope under my feet, the sound of the swoosh of the skiers going by, and the sound of all the cheery people around me having fun. And yet I was there on the flat ground, so scared, so scared. Oh my God. And yet I moved forward because I took the small steps that were necessary. I had already taken a big step in booking that trip, but it was small in the sense of I wasn't going to get hurt just by booking the trip,
Mm-hmm.
Not usually anyway.
Right, right.
So I started by putting those awful ski boots on. Boy, were they painful, but everyone was having fun. So I didn't want to let ski boots stop me.
Right.
I wore the ski boots and I figured I'm going to learn, or I'm not, but I'm going to make the attempt to learn how to adapt to wearing these ski boots, because there is an art to that.
Most people don't realize in ski boots, you can't, move your foot towards your ankle anymore because it braces your foot so it stays in the skis to give you a foundation.
Yeah, well, that's also what I learned, that even though they were so painful, the positive side was that they gave me more stability and balance
Mm-hmm.
on the skis. And that's something else that I had to learn, how to balance on skis, how to have that gliding position that feels so counterintuitive. You feel like you're going to fall forward. But they were explaining to me over and over again how, no, physics, you're not generally going to face plant. That's not how it works.
Well, you do if you lean to the too far to the sides, you might do a
No, I
body
wasn't leaning too. Oh, I wasn't leaning to the side. I was.
just going forward.
Yeah. So I was afraid that if I leaned into it, that I would fall forward.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, no, not just by leaning into it. You don't go forward. And in fact, every time I fell either backward or to the side. And I fell lots and lots of times.
I did too, and I could see everything. It was a matter of just trying to feel the snow and learn my balance.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of it is about learning to be in the present moment and away from our worries, fears, analyses, all of that, and just enjoying, or at least processing, the present moment as it is. I'll never forget the first time that, because they have wonderful ski guides and volunteers that literally forge a path forward for blind skiers so that we can be safe. I had 2 people with me at this point. It was either 2 or 3. It might have even been 3. And I remember when that first push down that hill, and it was so exciting. I wasn't even on the ski lift at that point, but I was gliding, I was skiing, I was doing it, and it was exhilarating because I was doing something that I had literally thought was impossible. Listening to the directions where they were saying, whether I should make a slow left or a hard left, or stop or turn, or fall even.
I used to do the bunny slopes for the little kids.
That's what I do.
And so the fact is I loved it because it gives you that up and down movement, but it gives you the ability to control yourself easier than if you go off of the higher slopes. And I learned how to do those, but I love the bunny slopes because you could take your time. And the hardest thing for me was learning how to snowplow. And it's a type of formation of your skis.
I learned it.
See, that was my trouble. Now, if my skis were straight, I was okay. I could turn to the left. I could lean to the right and do fine. But trying to keep them pointed in the center kind of messed up my brain.
Yeah, it's very challenging. What I ultimately found was the easiest way for me to turn was what they call an edge turn, where you just kind of turn your skis. You kind of it's like this kind of movement. I don't even know how to, from the horizontal to the vertical with your foot.
Yes.
Where you're just digging that edge into your skis, and it helps you to turn easier.
Once
I learned
that came naturally to me, but trying to learn to snowplow was my biggest challenge.
Well, that helped me a lot, because when the snowplow thing didn't work too well, at least I knew I could turn all the way around and stop.
I did that too. I absolutely did that too. I hadn't, I could actually land on my butt every time I tried to stop. So it was not intentional, but it was just something that happened,
Yeah, and I am by no means a good skier. I am an absolutely terrible skier. And yet it doesn't matter, because I tried something that many people have never even thought they would try. And that's exciting.
Very exciting and amazing for those of us who can't even do it with sight. I mean, just be honest, because there's some people that have so many fears they don't get beyond.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The only way I was able to get beyond my fears was taking steps toward facing them, learning the skills needed, building the trust with the people who were showing me the way, finding mentors when I needed it. So it's very much a journey of steps.
You didn't have this down, but you talked about having a sensei. What kind of martial arts did you do?
Ninjutsu, which
Ooh.
is kind of a variety martial art. So we do, and it's a class for the blind. I was so lucky to have found a class like this and an inspirational sensei. His organization, in case anyone's curious, is called Third Eye Insight, which I
Oh,
know you'll love that name, so that's why I
yes.
mentioned it, because it's all about the third
Mm,
eye in the middle of your forehead. The idea that we can't see, but we have the third eye is his framework. So he is very inspirational to me because he lost his vision. A lot of people, when they lose their vision, they go through a longer period of, naturally, they grieve
mhm,
their vision that they lost.
mhm,
And that's a natural response to any loss, grieving. And it's also a learning curve because you literally are changing. And the reason I think why a lot of sighted people can't imagine and they think I'm so amazing is because it's a completely different way of perceiving the world.
mhm.
So not having done it, they don't understand it. So therefore they're amazed and they admire it.
I'm actually one of those people because I had my own challenges, and having to step through the threshold on each and every one of those fears was very monumental in my life. So I can understand, if that's why I asked you before, have you been blind since birth? Because there is such a process of overcoming what you've lost.
Absolutely. My point in talking about him and his loss is that what he did to deal with that loss is that he went on and to go and live his life. And in doing that, he discovered that there wasn't really a good supportive place for blind and visually impaired people to work out, especially when they were new to vision loss.
Hmm.
Instead of feeling sorry about that and feeling very sad and all that, I'm sure there was that, but he took a big step fairly early on in his vision journey. And that big step was, if there isn't a program, I'm going to create one. And I just thought that was tremendously inspiring, that when somebody's literally in the middle of a difficult time in their life, that they're going to go ahead and create for others. And that
Hmm.
really is what makes life worth living, when we know that we're having an impact on other people.
It is. And again, that's something that I was so excited when I saw that you came up. I remember seeing you in that networking group, and I thought, oh, I'm going to enjoy this so much. I worked with troubled kids, but I also dealt with a lot of CDC kids, which were Down syndrome kids, kids with disabilities, and
Mhm.
they were amazing. And hopefully, I'll be seeing them this Friday, just to go back and take them lunch and spend some time with them, because I haven't seen them for a year, and enjoy their company because their souls are so pure. Their sight is so golden, whether they can see or not, but their intuitive sight is so golden that I love the innocence in their lives. And I want to make sure that innocence stays there.
Yeah, it's interesting that I feel like we lose a lot of our innocence as we grow up. And I've especially experienced this as a creator, because I'm primarily a writer. That's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that even as I write nonfiction for clients, as a little kid, I used to write fiction. I used to make stuff up. And I don't do that nearly as much as an adult, because I start to second guess myself and I start to think about everything that my fiction isn't, you know, or I start to just be like, or I get bored, like, oh, this isn't interesting. I'm not creating a good story. Why am I bothering? So it's so interesting that you talk about innocence, because I feel like exploring creativity and doing unusual things like skiing or improv or any number of adventures that we can have is a way of gaining some of that. I don't know if innocence is the right word, but that novelty
Mm-hmm.
back in our lives, and also that playfulness. the idea that we can play, we can experiment, we can explore.
And have fun.
Exactly.
And when you're doing it and you're having fun, it becomes a why, it becomes a passion, it becomes a purpose. And that's where people
Definitely.
kind of get confused with that.
Yeah, I have the most fun when I'm learning and discovering new things. When I'm working with clients and they have something new to teach me that's like, you ever have those aha moments, either where you figure something out for yourself or things just click. They
Yes.
come
Yeah.
together in your head and you're like, wow, I didn't know that. I love to share those moments with the world. And that's why my target is experts, innovators, thought leaders, people who can think outside the box in some way, shape, or form.
I love that. Yes, it is. It is that epiphany of having that, oh my gosh, I finally get it. And then the bad part some people do is they say, why did it take me so long to get to this point while you were living in between the box?
Yeah, yeah. And I get that way a lot in life. Like, oh, why is this taking so long? I admit to not being the most patient person in the world. And yet at the same time, I look back at all the times when I faced fears successfully, and a lot of it really is, small steps.
It is.
And
It
it
is.
really is. And it's also finding the rewards on the journey. If I didn't have some enjoyment of the process when I was up there in Vermont, if I didn't enjoy traveling and meeting with the people, I don't know that I would have been able to book the trip, or I don't know that I would have persevered if I didn't see what was possible around me.
And I understand that. And that, I think, is humanity in itself and their own issues, no matter what is going on in the world, no matter what their physical or mental or emotional disabilities are. I think that has a lot to do with understanding yourself.
Yeah, and back to that fear of telling my story.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to see other people sharing their stories and getting through it. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when I was at a speaker training workshop from the Women's Prosperity Network, incredible organization. And they actually teach about the business of speaking and not just like public speaking in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I was at this business of speaking workshop, and this one woman was sharing about her story with cancer. And I was just so blown away that she was being so vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
because I thought, well, what if people judge her? And everyone was, at least everyone who was speaking about it, was supportive. And I'm like, well, I'm probably not going to cry up there. So why don't I go up there? If she can do that, if she can cry and walk back to her desk and feel good about her experience,
Mm-hmm.
then I can go up there and brainstorm with the coaches in front of the room and share my story. And that's when we started talking about turning points, like going around the block, like my unintentional entrepreneur journey, like my skiing experience, which was still pretty fresh and new at that time. I realized over time, as I started getting offers to be part of projects that required me to tell my story.
Mm.
So I saw it as, instead of seeing my stories as a burden, I saw them as opportunities. Suddenly, the perspective was different when people were interested in them and not just being polite.
I like that. I love that, because I used my experience of being abandoned in an orphanage. At 8 years old, I promised myself that I would become that person for kids who didn't have support, who didn't have that guidance in their lives. And 21 years of my 40 years in law enforcement, I dealt with troubled youth. And it was to help them to get beyond their limitations and help them to see that there's other options, and that education is paramount with being competitive in the world. And
Yes,
so,
it sure is.
and so the thing is when you're not able to dream and you're just surviving, dreaming is a luxury, and most people don't understand
Yes.
that. So I absolutely relate with the fact that no matter what your obstacles are in life, no matter what your trials or tribulations end up being, it's ultimately up to you to make those decisions to become your best version of you.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'd like to ask, is there, because you are a writer, and I am a writer too, I'm a 3-time international published bestseller writer. What would be 3 tips in writing that you could give my audience?
Well, tip number 1, I would say embrace your story. Tip number 2 would be leverage your vulnerability. So we are not sharing vulnerability, especially in the business world and in public. I'm not asking clients to share their vulnerability so that everyone sees their raw side. I'm asking them to share their vulnerability in pieces and in carefully decided, like, what are we going to talk about? Because I want people to understand the strengths, the journey, embrace the journey where they are today, how they got there. In my case, I needed to go through a journey of understanding how to tell my story, of seeing the story as an opportunity. I needed to learn to tell my stories from the other side, from a strengths-based perspective. And I needed to learn to have fun with my story. Those are all skills that I can then look at and say to my clients, I've been there where you are struggling to decide what about your story you should share. So when I'm writing for people, or when I'm helping them to decide what parts of their story they're going to tell, I can then, well, people say I inspire them because I've shared my own story. The story is fun and inspiring, but also the sharing.
I agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. So those would be the 2 tips, embrace the story, kind of, and the 3rd tip is enjoy the journey, because that is so important, and kind of remembering to write down those little moments along the way. And that's something that I am learning and growing with as well.
I love that. I love that. Krista, we're gonna take you back to your 5-year-old inner child. So just take a deep breath in, hold it, and exhale. And as you connect to your 5-year-old child, what would she say about you now?
Wow, you ski? That's great. And wow, you're so different. You're not what I thought you'd be.
I love that. I love that. And it's amazing because you had talked about getting beyond the confusion before. And I think that has to do with telling your story.
Yeah, I think the telling my story does help to unmuddle the confusion, and also utilizing it to go forward, utilizing it to inspire my clients, utilizing it in my business, and not just, oh, I'm blind, I have to get through the blindness story. So it helps. But it's also interesting that, like, I've done certain things that I never thought I'd be able to do. And yet there are other things that I thought I would, as a kid, I thought I would have this, I don't know, this great job somewhere, that was my vision at that time.
Right.
And that's not what happened. What happened is that I forged my own path, and that I'm continuing to grow on that path.
I love that. I love that. I am so honored, Krista, that you were here today. I thank you. And I want to kind of like in 6-8 months, bring you back to find out where you're at there compared to where you are now, because just to follow the journey and the path.
All right, sure.
Okay, hold on just a second. It takes a special kind of individual to dream their dreams, their thoughts, and their ideas and turn it into the reality. Krista Giannak has stepped past her fears. She stayed the course and had the courage to do the follow through to the end. Krista Giannak, you've championed yourself. Now we know who you've become. Thank you for being here today, sharing your ideas, your thoughts, your dreams, and just your aura with our audience today. I am so grateful, so honored.